If you look at the FBI's most wanted list, James Whitey Bulger is just below Osama bin Laden. He is charged with committing 20 murders and suspected in at least 20 more. But despite an international manhunt, the leader of Boston's Irish mob has been a fugitive for more than 10 years. If anyone has a clue where he is, it's Kevin Weeks. For 20 years, he was Bulger's right-hand man, and the last person known to have seen him alive in the United States. But 6 years ago, Weeks turned on his boss, becoming one of the most important witnesses ever against organized crime. Tonight, you'll hear Kevin Weeks' story, which he's written in a book called Brutal. It's about murder, mayhem, and treachery, and it's told by the keeper of Whitey Bulger's darkest secrets. Kevin Weeks is a soft-spoken 49-year-old native of South Boston. But don't be fooled by the low-key, matter-of-fact way he answers questions about his life of crime.
You seem to have committed every crime in the book. Let me know if I've got all of this right. You beat people up?
Yes.
Put them in the hospital?
Yes.
Shot, stabbed people?
Yes.
Helped kidnap people?
Yes.
And you were an accessory to murders?
Correct.
That's quite a resume.
It's the business we're in.
The business they were in was organized crime, and what set Whitey Bulger's organization apart was its penchant for violence. Weeks says it was all part of the folklore of this Irish working-class neighborhood known as Southie.
Was it a tough neighborhood when you were growing up, Kevin?
You had to fight. You didn't have to win, but you had to fight.
On these streets, Whitey Bulger was known as a vicious gangster who never hesitated to use violence. Weeks, who had a reputation as a tenacious street fighter, caught the crime boss's eye while he was working as a bouncer at a local bar. Over the years, he became Bulger's most trusted confidant.
What did you do for him? What was your job?
Anything he asked me to do.
Including murder. For 20 years, Weeks was with the crime boss nearly every day, but they were exceedingly careful. This is one of only 2 known photographs of them together. It was taken at a park called Castle Island, where they talked business out of earshot of police bugs. Weeks says the man he called Jimmy was a criminal mastermind.
98% of his waking hours was dedicated to crime, 2% to pleasure. He was very disciplined. Had no bad habits. He didn't drink, he didn't gamble, didn't do drugs.
No bad habits if you don't count murder. And it was something Weeks says Whitey thoroughly enjoyed.
How did he kill people?
Oh, he stabbed people, he beat people with bats, he shot people, strangled people, run them over with cars.
You said also that he liked killing.
Yeah.
Explain that to me.
After he would kill somebody, it was like a stress relief. You know, he'd be nice and calm for a couple of weeks afterwards. Like he just got rid of all his stress.
By killing?
Yes.
Well, that's a bizarre way to get rid of stress.
Weeks told us he helped Bulger commit 3 murders in this house. He lured the victims there, stood guard over them while they were interrogated, and after they were killed, he buried them in the basement. One of the victims was a gun runner named John McIntyre, who was cooperating with police.
John McIntyre was originally strangled, but the rope was too thick, so he was gagging. So Jimmy shot him in the head, and then he pulled his teeth, and we buried him.
Pulled his teeth?
Yes.
Why?
Back then there was dental records. There was no DNA.
So that was to prevent people from being
identified.
No regrets about the loss of life you're responsible for?
No.
If he has any regrets, it's about one person he didn't kill. Howie Carr is a columnist for the Boston Herald as well as a radio talk show host who has been a thorn in the side of Whitey Bulger and his gang for 20 years.
Whitey Bulger is a serial killer, cocaine dealer, bank robber, pedophile, very smart, criminal.
Did you consider him a worthy adversary? I mean, is that why you went after him so hard?
I went after Whitey just because I couldn't believe he was getting away with what he was doing and that nobody would write about it.
So perhaps it's no surprise that Bulger and Weeks hatched a plan to take Howie Carr out of the newspaper and off the airways for good.
We found out he lived down in Acton, Massachusetts. We drove down his house. We took pictures, we scoped it out, we looked for an escape route. We had one plan, we were going to fill a basketball with C4.
Plastic explosive.
Correct. And when he came out of the house, we were going to blow it up and kill him. But we decided that we'd probably take the house down too and kill some innocent people, his family. So we nixed that plan.
Plan B, he says, was much more direct. Weeks was just going to shoot him.
I was down his house one morning, about 5:30 in the morning, across the street in the cemetery with the rifle, waiting for him to come out. And he came out about between 7:15, 7:30, and he had his daughter with him. I assume it was his daughter, young girl. He's holding her by the hand, going to his car. So I had to pass on it. And then...
Why'd you have to pass?
Yeah, I didn't want to kill him in front of his daughter.
You had him in your sights?
Yeah.
So if he had come out the door by himself, he'd be a dead man.
Yeah.
Your reaction to that?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I believe him or not.
And he says he was in the graveyard. There's a graveyard across the street from your house?
Yeah, there is.
He said he was in the graveyard and had you in the scope. He had you in his sights.
It just doesn't seem like Kevin would have the stones to do it. I mean, I could see if he said Whitey was there, well, you wouldn't be interviewing me because I'd be dead. But I'm just not sure Weeks is capable of that.
He doesn't believe your story. He also said you didn't have the stones to kill him.
Really? Well, I don't think Howie Carr has the stones to confront any man and say what he prints to their face.
What would you say to Howie Carr if he were here?
I wouldn't say anything to Howie Carr. He could tell me what he thinks of me, and I'll show him what I think of him.
And how would you do that, Kevin?
I think I could be creative. I could figure something out.
Creative? What does that mean?
Whatever comes to mind at the time.
I would assume after the time you've spent in jail, you're not going to kill him.
No, but, you know, it's a loaded question.
You could say yes or no.
Well, I don't like him.
For 20 years, Weeks and Bulger were practically untouchable. One reason, he says, was that they had 6 FBI agents and dozens of Boston cops on the payroll.
Every time we made a score, say there was 4 of us involved in the score, it would be cut up 5 ways, and the 5th piece would go to law enforcement, to the connections. And we were always getting information back about investigations that were going on, things people were doing, saying about us, grand juries, things like that.
From law enforcement?
From law enforcement.
Bulger even used tips from an FBI agent named John Connolly to identify and kill informants within his own organization. Connolly is charged with murder in connection with his ties to Bulger's gang. With help like that, they amassed tens of millions of dollars from gambling, drugs, robberies, and extortions. Once, Bulger and Weeks even hit the Massachusetts State Lottery, winning $14.7 million, although many suspect they simply coerced the winning ticket holder into having them as partners. Then, in a flash, their luck ran out. It was 2 days before Christmas of 1994 when a tip from a crooked FBI agent marked the beginning of the end for South Boston's Irish mob. That was the day Whitey Bulger found out he was about to be arrested and charged with extortion and racketeering. Weeks says Bulger knew he had been under investigation, but no one knew how much planning he had done to be ready for this day. Since the early 80s, he had been creating new identities and stashing millions of dollars in safe deposit boxes around the world.
He's probably worth 30 to $50 million.
$50 million?
Yeah.
So he could live a long time on that.
Comfortably.
Weeks was one of the few people Bulger trusted enough to stay in touch. He says he was able to meet face-to-face with the most wanted man in America 5 times over the next 2 years, in Boston, Chicago, and New York, delivering forged identifications and keeping him abreast of developments back home. He says the meetings were always arranged by phone.
We had code words for different places. When he wanted me to go to New York, he'd tell me he'd meet me at the Lions.
Where was that?
It was the public library. It had 2 big lions out front.
Bulger told him big cities allowed him to hide in plain sight. One time, Whitey asked directions from a New York City cop.
He walked up to him, and He was looking for a street restaurant, and he asked the cop for directions. And I couldn't believe it. I'm just looking at him. This guy's wanted. He just gave him directions and stuff. He thanked him. We walked away.
Weeks says the last time he saw Bulger was in New York in 1996, almost 2 years after he vanished. He says Whitey told him he'd be in touch, but he never called again. A few months later, there was this bombshell. Reports that Whitey Bulger had been a top-level FBI informant since 1975. Bulger, who'd killed anyone he thought was an informant, had all along been giving the feds information about rival criminals as well as some members of his own gang. Weeks, who was still a player in the Boston underworld, was shattered.
He betrayed me the whole time. He betrayed all of us.
Tell me how he betrayed all of you.
Well, we knew we were paying for information, that we had sources in law enforcement. So as far as we were concerned, the relationship was one way. We were receiving information. We were paying for the information. Now we find out he's given information.
So he was giving up some of his own people.
He was giving up some of his own people. He was giving up the competition. He basically made a deal with the FBI. They gave him carte blanche to do what he wanted.
Weeks' turn to make a deal came in 1999 when he was arrested and charged with 29 crimes. Facing life in prison and abandoned by his boss, he decided to cooperate.
So what did you do?
We made a deal to sit down and talk. They wanted proof that I was telling the truth. So I led them to 3 bodies.
For years, Whitey Bulger's victims had simply disappeared, and police could never make a murder charge against him stick. Weeks literally knew where the bodies were buried, and he eventually led them to 6 of them. When it was all over, prosecutors were able to charge Bulger with 20 additional counts of murder. In return for his cooperation, Weeks spent just 72 months in prison. He was released last year.
A lot of people, particularly the families of the victims, have been outraged. I mean, they look at it and said, we lost a loved one, and this guy's walking out on the street.
They're entitled to their feelings. I mean, if someone killed a loved one of mine, I'd want to kill them. I wouldn't want them in jail. I'd want to kill them. So they're entitled to, and they're probably correct.
Weeks says he isn't worried about his safety. He's refused the witness protection program and is already back in Southie, where he says people now know the reality behind the myth of Whitey Bulger.
We were supposed to live by a certain code, and this was his teaching too. You never rat on your friends, you never rat on your family, you never give everyone up. You have a problem, you take it to the street.
You have any idea where he is today?
A definitive idea? No. I mean, I believe he's probably over in Europe somewhere. I believe he went over to Europe, and I think he got trapped over there after 9/11.
And couldn't come back.
Correct.
The federal task force assigned to capture Bulger says the last confirmed sighting of him was in London in 2002. Last week, the task force released this 26-year-old surveillance tape of Whitey Bulger in hopes that someone might recognize his walk or mannerisms.
There are few men alive today with the underworld credentials of John Martorano, and even fewer who are out of prison and walking the streets. For more than a decade, Martorano was the chief executioner for Boston's Winter Hill Gang, a loose confederation of Irish and Italian-American gangsters run by James Whitey Bulger. Martorano, a former Catholic altar boy and high school football star, became a cool and calculating killer. But he's perhaps best known as the government witness who helped expose a web of corruption and collusion involving the mob and the Boston office of the FBI. For years, he was one of the most feared men in Boston, and this is why.
Did you keep count of how many people you killed?
Never. Until in the end, I never realized it was that many.
How many?
A lot. Too many.
Do you have a number?
I confessed to 20 in court.
Sure you remembered them all?
I hope so.
Martorano had to remember them all. It was part of a deal he cut with the federal government that put him back on the streets of Boston after only 12 years in prison, a little more than 7 months served for each of the 20 people he killed. many of them fellow gangsters, and many of them at close range after looking into their eyes.
Did you always kill people by shooting them?
I think I stabbed one guy.
But you like guns?
Well, it's the easiest way, I think.
Did you get any satisfaction out of the fact that people were afraid of you?
No. But everybody likes to be respected for one thing or another.
His manner is unemotional and detached, and he speaks with the brevity of a professional witness, which he has become. His testimony helped wipe out one of the largest criminal enterprises in New England, for which he served as chief executioner. But Martorano is no psychopath, and he doesn't much like the word hitman.
The hitman is, that sounds to me like somebody's getting paid a paid contract. I mean, you could never pay me to kill anybody.
A lot of people would say you're a serial killer.
I might be a vigilante, but not a serial killer. Serial killers, you have to stop them, they'll never stop. And they enjoy it. I never enjoyed it. I don't enjoy risking my life, but if the cause was right, I would.
So you felt like you were doing the right thing?
I always felt like I was doing the right thing. Even if it was wrong, I always tried to do the right thing.
If you believe John Martorano, and the Justice Department does, he killed out of a sense of loyalty and duty. He sees himself as a stand-up guy, a man of his word, which is why he decided to talk to us. It goes back 50 years when Martorano was a star running back on the Mount St. Charles Academy football team in Rhode Island. One of his blockers was our late colleague, 60 Minutes correspondent Ed Bradley.
That's you?
Yeah, that's me. That's it. That's me.
And that's Ed?
That's Ed. That's Big Ed. That's what I call him, Big Ed.
He promised Bradley he would sit down with him and tell his story, but Ed died unexpectedly before Martorano got out of prison.
I never thought I'd be sitting here with you. I thought I'd be here with Ed, but I'm sitting here because Ed wanted to sit here with me, and I'm honoring that.
I know one of the questions that Ed wanted to ask you. And it's sort of the way that Ed asked those questions. He wanted, I think he wanted to be sitting here and say, "What happened, Johnny?" Why was it, you think, that you went in different directions?
Well, I think it was mainly the influence of my father and his principles and his values that he pushed on to me.
His father owned an after-hours club called Luigi's in a rough Boston neighborhood known as the Combat Zone. It was a hangout for hoodlums who would become Martorano's role models, and many of them shared his father's simple Sicilian values.
He was the oldest son, and he taught me, you're the oldest son, and this is your heritage. You got to take care of your family and be a man. I don't care what else you are, you got to be a man.
It was a code he lived by and killed for. The first time, it was an ex-con named Robert Palladino, who he thought was going to implicate his brother Jimmy in a murder. Palladino was found under an expressway with a bullet in his head.
You didn't see anything wrong with it?
No, I saved my brother's life. Somebody got hurt. That had to be.
It felt like a duty.
An obligation.
Was the next time easier?
Well, it's sort of like a lawyer trying his first case. It's difficult, but the next case is easier. Then it gets easier, I guess, as you go, because it's, doing this is harder than that.
Why?
Because it's hard for me to do. I never did it before.
By the 1970s, his circle of friends and family had expanded to include the Winter Hill Gang, led by the notorious Irish mob boss James Whitey Bulger and Stevie the Rifleman Flemmy. Martorano was their partner in a business that included gambling, loan sharking, extortion, and murder. Martorano's specialty was conflict resolution.
We had a lot of problems with people, and you just kill them before they kill you. Just kill or get killed at times.
I mean, on one occasion, you walked into a crowded bar.
Mm-hmm.
And shot somebody.
Mm-hmm.
In broad daylight.
Correct.
With the policeman across the street.
Correct.
That's pretty confident.
Well, I felt confident. You put a disguise on, and and you just to get to feel invisible.
Do you remember what the disguise was?
Yeah, had a yellow hard hat, a white meat cutter's coat, full length, and a beard and mustache and sunglasses.
What'd you do afterwards?
I went home and changed, back to work. Close to 30
They operated out of this old body shop, long since abandoned, but Whitey Bulger's chair is still there.
These are the rooms you don't want to go in.
And so is his old office.
I think that's the trap door for the cellar. Used to leave that open all the time, just intimidate people, try to get the truth out of them.
Oh, yeah?
People would look down there and just wonder.
Anybody go down there and never come up?
I think so, yeah.
That's a nice little touch.
By 1978, Martorano had already killed 18 people. And facing an indictment for fixing horse races, he fled to Florida, where he was living a quiet life under the name Richard O'Coin. He was only there a few years when Bulger and Flemmy called, asking him to carry out a murder that made headlines across the country: the assassination of a wealthy corporate executive in the parking lot of the exclusive Southern Hills Country Club in Tulsa. The victim was Roger Wheeler, the CEO of Telex Corporation and owner of World Highlight, a profitable sports betting business that Bulger was trying to muscle in on. Martorano says the logistical information to carry out the hit was provided by a former Boston FBI agent named Paul Rico.
How did you manage to get into the Southern Hills Country Club to kill Mr. Wheeler?
There was no gates. Could drive in. Waited for him to finish playing golf. I had an update when he was going to his tee time.
You knew what he looked like?
I had his description from Rico.
How many times did you shoot him?
Once.
Did you shoot him between the eyes?
Yeah, around there.
Martorano says it wasn't the first or the last time he would get useful information from an FBI man. One of its top organized crime investigators in Boston, a corrupt agent named John Conley, helped them out for years. Martorano says it was Conley who told them that an associate of theirs named John Callahan was about to rat them out on the Wheeler murder. Callahan would become Martorano's 20th and final victim.
Do you think that John Conley knew that you were going to kill Callahan?
Sure. He said it. He said, we're all going to go to jail the rest of our life if this guy doesn't get killed.
And this is an FBI agent telling you this?
This is an FBI agent telling it to Whitey, telling me.
Martorano has already told this story under oath and is expected to tell it again to a jury in Florida this spring when Conley goes on trial for complicity in that murder. The former FBI agent is already serving a 10-year sentence for obstructing justice. In the end, it was a Massachusetts State Police investigation that began to unravel the Winter Hill Gang. In 1995, Martorano, Flemmy, and Whitey Bulger were all indicted for racketeering. Bulger, who was tipped off by Conley about his impending arrest, went underground and is still a fugitive. And in a Boston courtroom, Martorano was about to learn something that would change his life forever.
Oh, worst day of my life.
He knew that Bulger and Flemmy had been getting information from the FBI, but he didn't know they had also been providing it. For decades, his partners were top-level FBI informants, snitching on the Italian mafia and on Martorano and other gang members. They had violated his code of loyalty, especially Whitey Bulger.
I'll go along with a lot of things, but no Judas, no informant. I never informed or ratted on nobody. And if I could have killed him, I'd have killed him, but he wasn't there. And that's what I think he deserves.
Martorano decided to strike back the only way he could, using words as his weapon.
I gave him back what he gave everybody else.
You became an informer?
No, I became a government witness, not an informant or a rat. I became a government witness.
What's the difference?
One's got the courage to stand on the stand, the other one's doing it behind your back and dropping dimes. And how can I be ratting on a guy who's the rat for 30 years? I'm trying to stop him from ratting anymore.
Bulger, who is still on the FBI's most wanted list, is now facing 19 murder charges as a result largely of Martorano's testimony, and Flemmy is in prison for life. Martorano's cooperation helped solve nearly 40 murders, including the 20 he confessed to, and it helped uncover secret mob graves, all in return for a sentence of just 14 years.
In some ways, you got away with murder.
In some ways, he did get away with murder.
Donald Stern was the U.S. attorney who eventually signed off on the agreement.
The only thing worse than this deal was not doing this deal. Because if we didn't do this deal, no one would receive any punishment for these murders. Corrupt law enforcement arrangements would not have been uncovered and prosecuted. And the cancer in law enforcement that existed in Boston for a number of years would have remained there.
So you're saying it changed the landscape of organized crime in Boston?
It did.
Family and friends. Family and friends.
When Martorano was released from prison last spring, he decided to return to Boston. He says he feels safe here now. Most of his enemies are dead, in prison, or on the lam. In some cases, regret can take over a person's life. I don't get the sense that that's the case with you.
Well, maybe that's just not my temperament or my personality. Maybe it is, but you can't see it. Or maybe I can't express it the way you want it, but I have my regrets.
You seem cold. I mean, you killed 20 people, and that's all you can say about it?
I wish it wasn't that way. I mean, I wish there was none. You know, it can't change the past. I'm trying to do the best I can with the future and explain it as best I can.
Mm-hmm.
I regret it all. I can't change it.
You still a Catholic?
Sure.
I mean, you burn in hell for killing one person.
I don't believe that.
You don't believe that?
No. At one point, maybe a couple of years ago, I sent for a priest and gave him a confession. It was maybe 30 years since my last confession, but I went through the whole scenario with him and went through my whole life with him and confessed. And at the end of it, he says, well, what do you think I should give you for penance? I says, Father, you can justifiably crucify me. He laughed and says, nope, 10 Hail Marys, 10 Our Fathers, and don't do it again. So I'll listen to him.
Anything that could get you to kill again?
Not that I can think of.
Not even Whitey Bulger?
Well, there's a bounty on him.
In Massachusetts, when they say Mr. President, they don't mean George Bush. There's only one man with that title, Billy Bulger, President of the Massachusetts State Senate. Few legislators in America are as powerful. It's power he's proud to have and not afraid to use. He's not the kind of politician you run across much anymore. And by the way, his brother Whitey is the kind of person you may never want to run across. We'll get to him later. First, Mr. President. No, it's not George M. Cohan. No, it is not Jimmy Cagney playing George M. Cohan. It is a political relic, a throwback to a time of populist politicians who succeeded with street smarts and knowing which strings to pull. Billy Bulger almost defines Boston Irish.
Everybody!
His district is South Boston, home of the legendary boss politician James Michael Curley, whose spirit is alive and well in Bulger. Just watch him hosting his annual St. Patrick's Day breakfast, which begins with a fine Irish anthem,
Heavenly Father.
And of course, a blessing from the parish priest.
Amen.
Father, of course, is one of our best friends, and also he occupies a precinct which is very valuable to us all, because that's where St. Augustine's Cemetery is. You never know the result until the votes have been counted from St. Augustine's Cemetery. And somehow there always seem to be just enough to put you over.
The breakfast is a form of homage to Bulger. Anybody who's ever been anybody in Massachusetts politics pays his tribute by being bludgeoned by Bulger.
My advice is to get here on time from now on.
Ted Kennedy got his when he tried to sass Bulger over where to dump Boston's garbage.
I was wondering where you want me to bring it, Bill. Out of Weston or Wellesley or where is it going?
Hyannisport. Did you know Ben Franklin?
There is nothing he enjoys more than taking on a well-bred Yankee with inherited wealth.
Frugality.
Which makes Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld perfect for Bulger's meat axe.
I bet you never bounced a check. Oh, no. I'll bet you never made out a check.
Bulger's importance is as simple as this. If you want to get something done in Massachusetts, you need him. His fellow senators have elected him president for 15 years, the longest tenure in state history. Bulger knows everything about everyone in state office and thus knows how to get things done, certainly how to keep things moving.
Those in favor say aye, opposed no, the ayes have it. The rule is suspended. Third reading of the bill.
Legislators give him what he wants because he knows how to get them what they want. Let me let you describe yourself as others see you.
Autocratic, dictatorial. Those are
Boss.
Boss. Those kinds of things.
Iron-fisted.
Quick of the gavel.
The rule is suspended.
The truth of the matter is that this would be a debating society, the Senate, or any legislative body, unless somebody said at some point, after we finish the debate, and after everyone has had his say, we're going to have some kind of action.
But there is the perception that sooner or later, and generally sooner, Bill Bulger has his way.
On many major matters, I have my way.
When he's not presiding in the Senate chamber, he acts as House historian.
John Parker was the captain of the militia. And
The
he was
little
kind of
Irishman
his
from
muscle.
Southie holding forth in what was once the preserve of the Protestant Brahmins. Bulger's a man of simple taste, but does not mind one bit the office he inherited, much grander even than the governor's.
You came in and you said, thanks, you Yankee Brahmins, for letting us use your country. And everybody laughed and laughed. And so, Mr. President, I want to say to you, thank you so much for letting us use your State House. Thank you.
The Gov is only half kidding. Bulger's been ruthless with state appointees who cross him. He'll freeze salaries. One judge lost most of his staff and did not get a raise for 10 years. Such tales only add to his power.
The perception of power is just about the same thing as having power. If people think you have it, you have it.
And you do nothing to discourage that perception.
And there's value in it, for me.
It can be very useful, as in the case of Boston Edison.
Of course. Yeah.
They were polluting the air.
Right.
Particularly polluting South Boston, your constituency.
Right.
What'd you do about it?
I called them in and reasoned with them.
It was impossible, they said. I said, well, you're going to gas very soon. I said, you either go to gas or the Mass Turnpike extension goes right through your plant. I reasoned with them.
When you say, kidding, folks, the extension of the Mass Turnpike will be at your front door, it's a joke, everybody knows it's a joke, but it also enhances the reputation that on the real stuff,
right,
he is going to be that tough.
Yeah. There's something to that. I think it's the healthiest thing in the democracy that the people who are elected are not afraid to assert power. I think it's a very good thing.
Especially for Bulger's favorite things, like the Boston Public Library. When it desperately needed restoration money, he came up with a $35 million bill overnight. Somehow, when they need the money, they get the money.
As they should. As they should. I mean, it's a bastion of our civilization. People who are reading a book are people whose minds are engaged.
When Father McDonald needed money for the disabled, he went to the Senate president.
And it happened, right? What happened, yeah. God was good that day.
I, William Weld.
In the beginning, Governor Weld attacked Bulger's backroom tactics.
Congratulations.
But he soon discovered that the wisest thing a Republican governor could do was to get along with the Senate president. And together, they've turned the state's budget crisis around. Away from work, they've become a Mutt and Jeff vaudeville act. Anyone who's been in politics as long as Bulger has, especially in the fertile turf of Boston politics, is bound to be accused of corruption. And reporters here have been trying to pin stuff on him for years. But according to the columnist for the Boston Globe, Mike Barnacle, that chronicler of all things Bostonian, by local standards, he's clean.
I've never heard a story about any lobbyist or corporation having the arm put on them by Bill Bulger.
But what about jobs for the boys?
Jobs for the boys is not viewed, and girls now, is not viewed in his mind, or in that neighborhood, or I think in many neighborhoods when you get right down to it, as corruption. They refer to it as taking care of your own.
Bulger is said to be a champion of that, especially liberal with jobs at the MBTA, known as Mr. Bulger's Transit Authority.
Wacko, step up here.
Wacko Hurley, for example. What a name, what a face.
One word says it all.
Wacko organizes the St. Patrick's Day Parade in South Boston from his office at the MBTA.
Welcome. How are you?
Billy Bulger seems to know just about all of his constituents by name.
This is Kenny. How you doing, Al?
He invites them to his modest home where he and his wife Mary raised 9 kids.
Hi, everybody. Welcome.
What you're watching is old-fashioned Boston politics at work, in which patronage is the first rule of life.
Okay. I just might need a little help. We'll do anything humanly possible.
Boston newspapers blast him for patronage. In return, he does everything he can to discredit journalism in general and the Boston Globe in particular.
It's authentic. He feels it. He hates us. And when he does it, it helps him in South Boston because it's his thumb in our eye, something they have always wanted to do.
The first day I went into office, Marty Nolan from the Globe said, "Well, Mr. President, looks like a nice day, doesn't it?" I says, "Never mind your trick questions." And we've been getting along fine ever since.
When he gets talking about the Globe, it's almost as if he's going to have to stop and get a venom transplant to continue.
Oh, do I hate that newspaper. I mean, the editorials over there, it has to be an opium den.
Bulger keeps the tension with the press alive by not granting interviews.
I mean, who the hell are they?
And he was reluctant to do one with us, as the former state treasurer, Mr. Crane, reminded him.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that show.
Oh.
You'll wish it was 60 seconds.
What Mr. Crane might have been jabbing his good friend about is the sensitive issue of Billy Bulger's brother James, known as Whitey, a convicted felon who served time in prisons including Alcatraz for bank robbery and has since become, according to the feds, one of the most feared mobsters in Boston.
He's a big guy. He's a major league figure. Can't get around it.
Does Whitey have the same contempt for the press as Bill does?
I hope not.
Some people might go to great pains to distance themselves, to disown even a brother who went wrong. You've not done that.
No. He's my brother. I care about him.
You see him?
Oh, sure. I encourage him to come by all of the time.
Apart from his convictions, there was little known about Whitey Bulger, but then last year he made the score of his life, and he turned up here to collect. Whitey and 2 colleagues had the winning ticket in the Massachusetts State Lottery. The prize, $14 million. But was it his ticket?
No, it was not his ticket. It belonged to, I think, Mikey Linsky, who I think was probably told, you know, a couple of hours after the numbers came up that he had partners, that he had a couple of partners that he, you know, really, you know, couldn't live without, literally.
There was a lot of suspicion. The Senate president's brother wins the lottery. Come on, right?
Sure.
How'd you handle that?
I sort of just met it head on and told everybody, well, you know, when we won, or rather when he won the lottery, that kind of thing. Aha, they'd say.
And now I lay me down to slumber. I pray to heaven I hit the number. If I die before I wake, put $10 on 436-708. My brother wrote that prayer.
The Bulger brothers, the bad one and the good one, seem out of some old Hollywood movie. Billy, the educated classicist who does not own a television, still reads Latin and Greek books. Always a song in his heart and on his lips. And yet, true or not, a shadow of menace.
Now, I don't know of anyone that he's ever done anything to, but there is this myth that a lot of people live with that, you know, if I do this and he doesn't like it, either he will get me or, God forbid, he might say my name at lunch with Jimmy someday.
Morley's going to be good to me, aren't you, Morley? That's how they all start out. I'm your pal. What is it?
Just remember, I'm editing it.
Grab your camera and get out of here.
Billy Bulger says he seeks no higher office, that he's unelectable outside of South Boston, that other world filled with Protestants and Boston Globe readers. But year after year, his colleagues re-elect him as Senate President, afraid perhaps of that power, or of Whitey, or maybe they're just in awe of a masterful politician. The editorialists of Boston may call for his blood, but for Southie, it'll be some time before Billy Bulger's last hurrah is heard.
They'll make you or break you, but they'll never forsake you. In Southie, my hometown.
Charlie and Carol Gaskos were an elderly couple who moved to Santa Monica, California, sometime in early 1997 to begin a new phase of their life. For the next 14 years, they did almost nothing that was memorable, and they would be of absolutely no interest if it weren't for the fact that Charlie Gaskos turned out to be James Whitey Bulger, the notorious Boston gangster and longtime fugitive who's just beginning to serve 2 lifetime sentences. Carol Gaskos was actually Catherine Gregg, Whitey's longtime girlfriend and caregiver. The story of how they managed to elude an international manhunt for so long while hiding in plain sight is interesting. And tonight you'll hear it from the Gaskos neighbors, and for the first time, from the federal agents who finally unraveled the case with the help of a boob job and an alley cat. If you're forced into retirement with a comfortable nest egg and a desire to be left completely alone, there is no better place than Santa Monica, California. This low-key seaside suburb of L.A. is shared by transients and tourists, hippies and hedonists, celebrities, and lots of senior citizens, attracted to the climate and an abundance of inexpensive rent-controlled apartments just a few blocks from the ocean. Places like the Princess Eugenia on 3rd Street, which is where Charlie and Carol Gaskos, a childless couple from Chicago, lived for 14 years without attracting much attention from longtime neighbors or landlords. Josh Bond is the building manager. What were they like?
They were like the nice, retired old couple that lived in the apartment next to me.
Good tenants?
Excellent tenants. Never complained, always paid rent on time.
In cash?
In cash.
Janice Goodwin lived down the hall.
They had nothing, and they never went out. They'd never had food delivered. She never dressed nicely.
You thought they were poor?
Yes, without a doubt.
The one thing everyone remembers about the Gaskos is that they loved animals and always made a fuss over the ones in the neighborhood. Barbara Gluck remembers that Carol Gaskos always fed a stray cat after its owner had died.
She would, pet it and be sweet to it, and then she would put a plate of food, like, out here.
Mm-hmm. And she liked the cat?
Obviously. She loved the cat. And we all liked the cat, but she was taking care of the cat.
And what about Charlie Gaskos?
He always had a hat on and dark glasses. I have to say, it was mysterious to me why a lovely woman like that was hanging out with that guy, that old grumpy man. I never could figure that one out. Until I heard they had $800,000 something in the wall. And then I went, oh, okay,
Money wasn't the only thing found in the Gaskos' apartment on June 22, 2011, when the FBI stopped by and ended what it called the most extensive manhunt in the Bureau's history.
Weapons all over the apartment. I mean, weapons by his nightstand, weapons under the windowsill, shotguns, mini Rugers, rifles.
Loaded,
ready to go.
What had started out as a routine day for Special Agent Scott Garriola, who was in charge of hunting fugitives in L.A., would turn into one of the most interesting days of his career. After getting a call to stake out a building in Santa Monica, he notified his backup team with the LAPD.
I had 4 guys working that day, and they said, we got a tip on Whitey Bulger, and I'll see you there in about an hour. And invariably the text will return, who's Whitey Bulger?
Really?
A few of them, I had to gently remind him who Whitey Bulger was.
That he was number one on the FBI's most wanted list.
Number one, yeah. Big East Coast figure, but in the West Coast, not so much.
Mention any cartel leader.
The cops in L.A. were focused on gangbangers and cartel members, not some retired Irish mobster who hadn't been spotted in 16 years. But then few mobsters have ever been as infamous in a city as Whitey Bulger was in Boston, and his reputation was for more than just being grumpy. Besides extortion and flooding the city with cocaine, Bulger routinely performed or ordered executions, some at close range, some with a hail of bullets, and at least one by strangulation, after which it's said he took a nap. Special Agent Rich Tian, who ran the FBI's Whitey Bulger Fugitive Task Force, had heard it all.
Bulger was charged with 19 counts of murder. He was charged with other crimes. He was a scourge to the society in South Boston, his own community.
He was also a scourge to the FBI and a great source of embarrassment to Tian, Special Agent Phil Torsney, and others on the FBI task force. Years earlier, Whitey Bulger had infiltrated the Boston office of the FBI and bought off agents who protected him and plied him with information, including the tip that allowed Bulger to flee just days before he was to be indicted.
We really had to catch this guy to establish credibility after all the other issues, and it was just a matter of bringing this guy back to Boston to make sure this guy didn't die or get away with this thing.
Torsney, who's now retired, and Agent Tommy McDonald joined the task force in 2009. The joke was Bulger was on the FBI's least wanted list. There hadn't been a credible lead in more than a decade, and their efforts in Bulger's old neighborhood of South Boston were met with mistrust and ridicule.
Some people, they told us right out front, you guys aren't looking for that guy. People just made the assumption we had him stashed somewhere. I mean, people really thought that kind of thing.
Despite that mindset that we're not going to help you, the FBI still got it done.
Took 16 years.
Took 16 years, yeah. This was not a typical fugitive.
The FBI says Bulger had planned his getaway years in advance, with money set aside and a fake identity for a Thomas Baxter. During his first 2 years on the lam, Bulger was in touch with friends and family, shuttling between New York, Chicago, and the resort town of Grand Isle, Louisiana, where he rented a home until his identity was compromised. After that, it seemed as if Bulger had disappeared from the face of the earth, except for the alleged sightings all over the world.
How many of these tips do you think might have been true?
Boy, there was thousands and thousands of tips, and I don't think any of them were true.
One of the obstacles was there were really no good photographs of Bulger or his longtime live-in girlfriend, Catherine Gregg, a former dental hygienist. The FBI often noted that the couple shared a love of animals, especially dogs and cats, and asked veterinarians to be on the lookout. There were reports that Gregg once had breast implants and other plastic surgery in Boston, so the task force reached out to physicians. Eventually, they got a call from a Dr. Matthias Donnellan, who had located her files in storage.
I was trying to leave the office a little early to catch one of my kids' ball games, and I said, well, listen, I'm going to swing by in the morning and pick those up. And they said to me, do you want the photos too? And I said, you have photos? And they said, yeah, we have photos. And I said, we'll be there in 15 minutes.
The breast implant lead produced a treasure trove of high-resolution Catherine Gregg photographs that would help crack the case. The FBI decided to switch strategies, going after the girlfriend in order to catch the gangster.
This is an announcement by the FBI.
The FBI created this public service announcement.
60-year-old Gregg is the girlfriend of 81-year-old Bulger.
It ran in 14 markets on daytime talk shows aimed at women.
Call the tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI.
And it didn't take long. The very next morning, the Bulger task force got 3 messages from someone that used to live in Santa Monica and was 100% certain that Charlie and Carol Gaskos, apartment 303 at the Princess Eugenia Apartments, were the people they were looking for. The descriptions and the age difference matched, and Deputy U.S. Marshal Neil Sullivan, who handled the lead, said there was another piece of tantalizing information.
The tipster specifically described that they were caring for this cat and their love for this cat. So that was just one piece of the puzzle on the tip that just
added up to saying, if this isn't them, it's something we better check out immediately because it sure sounds like them.
A search of the FBI's computer database for the Gaskos raised another red flag, not for what it found, but for what it didn't.
Basically, like they were ghosts.
No driver's license.
Exactly. No driver's license, no California ID, like they didn't exist.
That's the apartment.
That corner on the 3rd floor.
On the right-hand side?
Yep.
By early afternoon, FBI agent Scott Garriola had set up a number of surveillance posts and had already met with apartment manager Josh Bond to talk about his tenants.
He closed the door, threw down a folder, and opened it up and said, "Are these the people that live in apartment 303?
Did you say anything when you saw the pictures?
My initial reaction was, holy
You're living next door to a gangster.
Well, I still didn't really know who he was.
But it didn't take him long to figure it out. While the FBI was mulling its options, Bond logged on to Bulger's Wikipedia page.
I'm just kind of scrolling down, and it's like, oh, wow, this guy's serious. It's like murders and extortion, and then I get to the bottom, and there's this thing. It's like from one of his old people saying, well, the last time I saw him, he said, you know, when he goes out, he's going to have guns, and he's going to be ready to take people with him. I was like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't be involved in this.
I mean, we were sitting here laughing about it, but he's a pretty serious guy.
Yeah.
He killed a lot of people.
True.
Or had them killed.
I didn't know that at the time.
Bond told the FBI he wasn't going to knock on the Gaskos' door because there was a note posted expressly asking people not to bother them. Carol had told neighbors that Charlie was showing signs of dementia.
So we were back there.
So Garriola devised a ruse involving the Gaskos' storage locker in the garage.
It had the name Gasko across it, and apartment 303.
He had the manager called to tell them that their locker had been broken into and that he needed someone to come down to see if anything was missing. Carol Gaskos said her husband would be right down.
We just rushed him.
You mean guns out, FBI,
Sure.
don't move?
Gave the words, hey, FBI, get your hands up. And hands went up right away. And then at that moment, we told him to get down on his knees, and he gave us, he gave us a, I ain't getting down on my effing knees.
Didn't want to get his pants dirty.
Didn't want to get his pants dirty. You know, wearing white and seeing the oil on the ground, I guess he didn't want to get down in oil.
Even at 81, this was a man used to being in control.
I asked him to identify himself, and that didn't go over well. He asked me to effing identify myself, which I did. And I asked him, I said, are you Whitey Bulger? He said, yes. Just about that moment, someone catches my attention from a few feet away by the elevator shaft.
It was Janice Goodwin from the 3rd floor, coming to do her laundry.
And I said, excuse me, I think I can help you. This man has dementia, so if he's acting oddly, you know, that could be why.
Immediately what flashed through my mind is, oh my God, I just arrested an 81-year-old man with Alzheimer's who thinks he's Whitey Bulger. What is he gonna tell me next? He's Elvis? So I said, do me a favor. I said, this woman over here says you have a touch of Alzheimer's. He said, don't listen to her, she's effing nuts. He says, I'm James Bulger.
A few minutes later, he confirmed it, signing a consent form allowing the FBI to search his apartment.
As he's signing, he says, that's the first time I've signed that name in a long time.
There was a feeling of resignation.
I don't think he had it. I did ask him, I said, hey, Whitey, I said, aren't you relieved that you don't have to look over your shoulder anymore and you know, it's come to an end? And he said, are you nuts?
But in some ways, Whitey Bulger and Catherine Gregg had already been prisoners in apartment 303, which appeared to be a mixture of the murderous and the mundane. Alongside the weapons and all the money, they had stockpiled a lifetime supply of cleansers, creams, and detergents. The FBI took special interest in a collection of 64-ounce bottles with white socks stretched over the top.
I said, hey, Whitey, what are these? Are these some kind of Molotov cocktail you're making? He goes, no. He said, I buy tube socks from the 99-cent store, and they're too tight on my calves. That's the way I stretch them out. I said, why are you shopping at the 99-cent store? You have $500,000 under your bed. He goes, I had to make the money last.
It's been said that one of the reasons it took so long to catch Whitey Bulger is that people were looking for a gangster, and Bulger, whether he liked it or not, had ceased to be one.
He said it was hard to keep up that mindset of a criminal, and that's part of the reason he came down to that garage. He said if he was on his game, 15, 20, 30 years ago, he probably would have sensed something there. But he said it was hard to stay on that edge, that criminal edge, after being on the lam as a regular citizen for 15 years.
The master manipulator gave credit to Catherine Gregg for keeping him crime-free, hoping it would mitigate her sentence. She's now serving 8 years for harboring a fugitive. On the long plane ride back to Boston, Bulger told his captors that he became obsessed with not getting caught and would do anything to avoid it, even if it meant obeying the law. Whitey Bulger's biggest fear, they said, was being discovered dead in his apartment, and he had a plan to avoid it.
If he became ill and knew he was on his deathbed, he'd go down to Arizona, crawl down the bottom of one of these mines and die and decompose and hope that we would never find him and still be looking for him forever.